from a PR perspective, they are probably sitting back, watching this play out, because the more publicity that he gets, because I suspect he's probably not going to be doing the rounds, although he'll probably be on Oprah next week telling his story, but he's not going to be doing probably the regular rounds, speaking to you guys, speaking to Sky News, etc., etc. He'll just leave it to this.
Jason Arday's memoir was not the first to contain an exaggerated life story. The best-selling memoir, The Salt Path, was sold as a true story about a couple's walk along the southwest coast path after one of them received a terminal diagnosis. But it later emerged that many of the details were misleading. So what responsibilities do publishers have to fact-check memoirs? We can speak to PR and book publicist Pat Lyddon. Morning, Pam.
Good morning.
It's good to speak to you. Explain, first of all, when we say fact-checking, I read a note from somebody in the days of the week gone by that fact-checking for publishers basically consists of, let's make sure we can't get sued. Other than that, off we go. Is it as loose as that?
Well, it's not changed very much, put it that way.
Okay.
Look at the situation that we're in now, where, poor Jason's in a bit of a pickle. But it's a really difficult one, because if you look at his background and his story, it's pretty compelling, isn't it? Testicular cancer, locked-in syndrome, he had autism, he had a coma. It's not the kind of thing that you would go away and say, can I look at medical records, can I check on this? It's a really compelling story. And it's sort of one of those things that probably, they probably did a few bit of fact-checking, but actually they didn't do a huge deep dive because they just don't have the time. If they've got an absolute bestseller on their hands, and they will know this, they're not going to go and do that deep dive.
Similarly, I would say, so it's reported in the Sunday Times today that some of the kind of more wild claims, such as running 30 marathons in 35 days and separately raising over £5.5 million for charity, they were watered down by the publisher. So I suppose, Pam, there will always be some things that are a bit more eye-catching that deserve a little bit more detail. But I take your point that if somebody's talking about their own kind of medical history, you might just take that at face value.
Oh, absolutely. I was looking at Amazon this morning. He's number 9, in biographies. So, the publicity isn't hurting him. He's been backed by, Chris Gardner, who wrote The Pursuit of Happiness, Kathy Burke, even James O'Brien. So, he's got these really strong testimonials. He's got this really strong story. But I think the thing that the publisher probably went for was the youngest black professor at Cambridge University, and that is really compelling in itself, and with all of his background. So they're probably going to think, okay, we're going to water down the stuff. But I think also, and as you alluded earlier to the Salt Path, and I wrote about the Salt Path last year because I was fully invested in that, as many of your listeners probably were. But we were 2 or 3 books in when we found out the truth. At least with Jason, we're finding out now, so people can make an informed decision. Actually, do I want to buy this book or not?
Yeah.
But then more and more is coming out every day. But I was talking about it with friends and colleagues, and it's like, do we really care that he's plagiarised this? Do we really care? When actually, what he's done is give a lot of hope and inspired a lot of people. And actually, to be perfectly frank, I know he's left the University of Cambridge now, but they're the only ones really coming out of this badly, because they also didn't do their due diligence. They also didn't fact check.
Absolutely, and that is the root of the problem. In a publishing context, Pam, is there any obligation on publishers, if something's described as a memoir, there can't be any obligation on them, I suppose, for it to be 100% factually accurate? Can we trust any memoir we read? Are we naive to think that a memoir is fully accurate?
And I think you're right. And I think in this day and age, how good are our memories, to be honest?
Yeah.
What is it they say, varied memories and that kind of thing. So I think you kind of have to go in and sort of take it with a pinch of salt. But I think also it's one of those things where you're pulled in by the story, and I guess he's not going to forget his earlier memories. He didn't talk for years. So he's not going to remember that, but I guess he's not going to remember every single detail. So when you are reading a memoir, you do have to sort of take it with a bit of pinch of salt. But I think it's interesting, this versus the salt part. This, we are going into, we know what's happened. And actually, it's quite interesting because it doesn't seem to be affecting the Amazon charts. He's going up the charts. Simon & Schuster have said they won't stop the book. They're going to carry on. And, from a PR perspective, they are probably sitting back, watching this play out, because the more publicity that he gets, because I suspect he's probably not going to be doing the rounds, although he'll probably be on Oprah next week telling his story, but he's not going to be doing probably the regular rounds, speaking to you guys, speaking to Sky News, etc., etc. He'll just leave it to this. So from a PR perspective, and if I was his publicist, I'd be a little bit happy. I know it sounds terrible, but, publicity, he hasn't hurt anyone, he hasn't killed anyone. He's just sort of bent the truth. And I think, he's not Lance Armstrong. Perhaps he's the Lance Armstrong of academia.
Yeah, but, I think that's, I was going to say, I think there's a distinction, isn't there? Because he's torched the education of lots of students at Cambridge who are now pretty unhappy. But I think there is a distinction between the Cambridge uni bit of it and the publishing the book bit of it, isn't there? And
you've got to remember, we're in the world of AI.
Yeah.
So plagiarism is going to go on. My daughter's doing GCSEs and she's constantly being told, we're going to fact check. I should imagine that academia is probably running around like headless chickens at the moment, thinking, oh my God, everybody's going to be fact-checked, and Cambridge and Oxford and all these amazing places, there's probably a lot of academics out there a little bit worried.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, Pam. It's good to speak to you, and that idea that PRs might not be all that bothered, actually. If this thing's flying, then why not? Pam Lyddon, yeah, good to speak to you. Thanks very much. A PR and book publicist. I wonder if we should be just really offended that it's being dubbed a memoir. There's loads of stuff that's been... You read this report in the Sunday Times today, there's loads of stuff that's been taken out. The Times has been reporting on various parts already that have been cut.
We heard out yesterday in the book proposal.
Yeah,
so in the book proposal for the memoir, he said he had testicular cancer, he had locked-in syndrome, and almost died in a car accident when he was a teenager. Then when the book, we spoke to Sarah Ditum this weekend. She's read it. None of these stories are in the book.
Yeah,
there are some equally eyebrow-raising, alarming stories in there. So why didn't that feature? When the Times asked the publishers about it, they didn't respond to comments about that. So many messages of you coming in. Steve said they should say it's non-fiction, non-fact. That says it all. Someone else said, well, why would anyone want to read, Fiona, a memoir which is filled with exaggeration and fantasy?
Yeah, so it doesn't need rebadged. Is there a new genre here where it's a fantasy memoir? I don't know. Where is the kind of offence here? And are the publishers right to carry on? Because they're going to go ahead with it.
Whenever you're talking about medical issues, and this is what the Salt Path really ventured into as well, there surely should be an obligation to fact check what you are talking about. The Salt Path end up talking about this almost sort of miraculous recovery from something incurable,
isn't it?
Which could be really damaging. You've got people going on long walks thinking they're going to be able to cure themselves. The other puzzle I've got about this story is this even just happened in the conversation with Pam, when so much of the things that Jason Arday said about himself come with these very heavy question marks. Why are some parts of his story sort of being put forward to say no question mark? She said, he was mute until he was this age, he's got autism. Isn't everything now up for question?
Yes, it has to be. It absolutely has to be. And it should be at the point that, as we all know, if somebody lies to you, then it's very difficult to build that trust back. So as soon as the first one's uncovered in this context, yes, everything should be up for grabs and up for debate and up for discussion. And I do wonder what the responsible way forward is on that. Fine, go ahead and publish the book, but is there any world in which it is not a disservice to other publishers to call this thing a memoir if you've got absolutely no certainty at all about anything that's in it?
Yeah, well, it's going to be published next week, so this story goes on and on. We have a thing when we're talking about how we're going to prepare our programme, and sometimes you might say, it's day 2 of this story, it's day 3. What day are we on for this Jason Arday story?
6, 7.
6 or 7, and it's going to keep going, I think, as the book is published, and then, we'll see how many people buy it as well. That'll be another interesting facet.